Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to part 2 of the Great Migration. And it's already done, but how do we do it? This is a talk really about, it's very top level, hard. It doesn't go very deep because I don't have the time to do that. But at some point we've completed the migration. But who am I? Patrick Fitzgerald. I've spent 40 years in tech. 7 years in the film and TV industry. They were overlapping, just in case you're wondering, I'm not that old. Currently, I'm the founder of the Geeko Foundation and CEO of iLayer Limited UK. So we did it, but how did we do it? This is the big thing. We were introduced to these characters in my previous presentation. We'll just take a small detour. When a film producer gets a line in a script that looks like that, they panic, because the thing is, the producer is responsible for the budget, and they don't know how the director is going to interpret that. Is it going to be someone picks up a paper and says World War II starts, and that's the only reference, or it could be entire Saving Private Ryan scenes required as part of the story. So it's in the same context. Let's deploy a new OS. I mean, and that's when the war began. Because, actually I'll go back to the previous slide. Because it all becomes justification, cost, logistics, manpower, and finally results. And obviously that last thing is the most important. And in a film, if you don't deliver the results, people don't see the film, and the producer loses money. So yeah, it's all about the the what, the why, and the how. So if you're going to engage in a mass migration, and what I'm talking about really is environments with more than 100 systems. And the reason why I say more than 100 systems is because the consulting and the upfront costs will make it difficult to justify unless you've got a very simple environment with a very simple set of hardware, client hardware systems. So you do this. You have to do a trial, grab your groups that are the simplest to migrate. So the ones that have browser-based apps, Java, Node, RDP, and of course there's a growing number of these. Microsoft 365 is one of those examples. But also something that I've discovered quite recently is that a lot of the end users don't even know that they're running in a browser because it's hidden quite well by the back-end application frameworks. So the next step is, right, so what kind of hardware they have. And as I said, charity begins at home, but support starts at the hardware. I've done a migration. I shouldn't have gone into it because I noticed that they had these workstation PCs or gaming machines. And they were all bought at the same time from the same manufacturer, but every single motherboard was different. Some of them didn't have. They were all the menu options were all different. It's very hard to find stuff. It was all about all the gaming stuff and how do you change the clock speed of the CPU and the GPU. It's nothing about what you really need if you're doing a migration. You need Wake on LAN and you need Pixie boot or UEFI boot. That's what you need. So once you've got past that sort of little hurdle, like you've got a client that has enterprise hardware. And by the way, enterprise hardware is all about the ability to migrate to different systems, to reboot, and do manageable, to manage your fleet of workstations. So grab a user group with simple requirements. So for example, just people doing Microsoft 365 or any other web-based program, like there might be SAP or something like that. I'm not sure if SAP is browser-based, but anything that's browser-based, super simple. Also take note of what the data, the volume of data is stored locally, because you're going to, if there is data that's important to the customer, to the user and the customer, then you need to find a way to migrate that off the system, because we're going to be reloading the system. In this case, if you're using Active Directory or any kind of LDAP, that is completely your friend. Don't mess with it. Don't try and migrate to a different LDAP solution or other system, because everything we're going to do is based on the user's nodes in LDAP and the computer nodes that are also stored in LDAP. Also, the login scripts or policies, all those kind of things are contained within that. Yep, and oh my God, you've just discovered there's data, user data. You're going to have to work out a way to migrate that off the system. That could be a NAS device you deploy, and as you migrate each group of people, you can reformat the entire device to make space for the next group that you migrate. So you can migrate it off and then migrate it back onto the Linux system, and that the way we do this is it'll keep the user permissions. So you'll be able to log onto the system, onto the Linux system, and you'll be able to open all your users' Windows-based application data files. And of course, we've always got the problems of printing. I don't have any solutions for that, but hopefully all the printers are supported and well known and well loved, and it can be integrated into Linux. Hopefully your needs analysis pilot would have accounted for all those, and you have solutions for that. Scanners as well. So the way we do it is you have a migration database, you connect the LDAP or AD server to it, you pull the user data and the computer data into the database, the PC node information, because when you create just so everyone is aware, when you attach a workstation or a PC to a domain, it creates an Active Directory node, which is that PC, which we'll see in a little bit. So we populate the migration database with the audit and then so we've got a carpet to discover. That's a piece of code we've written. It boots, net boots, and then looks down at the machine and goes, right, you've got this kind of hardware, you've got all these things, does an audit, so LS or LSH, HW info or something like that, and it uploads that to the migration system. And that populates all the things that are important and required for the migration itself. And the MAC address is the most important thing, really, because we use this. So we can then, once we've got all that information from doing a network boot, we can boot via the Wake on LAN, and because we've got the MAC address, and you can do a targeted Wake on LAN to each MAC address you see on the network if it's supported in the BIOS. So we've got to go back to the BIOS, make sure that's done. And then you can async the data back to your NAS server if that's required. And then you can trigger a reload once you've done the next group. And the secret source is the humble MAC address, and you'll see why shortly. So you boot the system in Pixie mode. TCP provides the IP address, which should be the same IP address because it's the same MAC address, unless you've got a very, very aggressive DHCP policy, but that doesn't really matter. The client says, hey, I'm this MAC address. if the file, if let me see, in Wacom, in Pixie Boot terms, you can have different files in your boot server that correspond to either each individual MAC address, or you could have a broad range that says anything that contacts me and says, I want to boot, here's the information. But what we do is we create a profile, which could be YAST, it could be Agama, it could be any of the other popular Linux distributions, and we use it as a template, and we take stuff that we've already discovered in the database and populate the install template with that information, and it gets stored on the boot server. So if a file matches the MAC address is found, it responds and sends it. And it also, and we use the LDAP and the database to dynamically create those files. And then we remove them on demand. We also use FE or EFI Boot Manager, which is quite good because we can do things like if we have Wake on LAN, we can trigger the machine to start up, and we can also tell it to run this program to say, you probably can't see it down there, but boot next. And boot next is just boot, next time you restart, just try booting, network booting, or run this other system that we've got. But going back to the firmware, I mean, for example, ThinkPad, my ThinkPad has all this stuff very easily laid out. You'll see the Wake on LAN there. I'm not sure if you can see the pointer. You want UEFI boot because that gets rid of the legacy boot systems. I can't really see it very well. And startup, I can't even read this. Yeah, so you can do, so network boot is Pixie Boot, and that's really kind of what you need. If you want to turn off the ability to do the device boot list, you can do that in any kind of BIOS or firmware. I've never actually been able to work out what really the difference is between BIOS and firmware because they do exactly the same thing, but there you go. This has come from a project that I was involved with about 5 years ago. We tried to get that off the ground, it was a start-up, we got some funding, and then COVID hit and it all kind of stopped. And we shut the company down. Back then, the project was called Snoopea, I don't know why, but it is what it is. And then it was also a cloud-based system because we were talking to customers, and what became very apparent is large customers have got massive teams, independent teams, different teams, sometimes from different outsources. Like with Allied Irish Bank, we had 2 different outsourced teams from India doing the workstations and the servers with 2 different teams. We had Irish Telecom, I think, handling the networking, and they had internal people managing the LDAP and AD environment. The problem with that is just coordinating them all to have one meeting is very, very difficult, and it ends up wasting a lot of time. Hence, if it's correspondingly easier if it's a smaller company, but it's also correspondingly much more difficult the more teams are involved and combining everyone. So we thought, well, instead of asking the customer to install 3 different systems or 3 different Linux systems, we'll put it out in the cloud. So there's a registration database, there's an MQ server, MQTT, which is a lightweight message queuing system, and there's a client service that runs on every workstation eventually. And this is an old version of Active Directory. Things might have changed, but you'll see here that there's a host OU, which is, I think I created that, or we created it as a test. These are the group of machines, and normally it's not visible in this. The computers OUs there. You can just drag those systems, put them into a different OU, and it doesn't affect anything. But then you could put, for example, you could have a group of people that are running Red Hat, another group of people using SUSE, another group of people with Ubuntu, and those machines that you drag into those groups become that style of machine. So you become an Ubuntu system if it goes into that group, just because we interrogate Active Directory, we build the profiles, the installation profiles, and then when next time they do a workstation boot from a net boot, the installation program starts. Similarly, you could do that by user group. So, for example, call center, or the front office staff, or test, or whoever you can do that with, and then and I think now. And then what was it happen? What actually sort of looked like in the so that's the group, and you see the grouping. All those systems are at a higher level. All you need to do is drag one of those systems into one of those folders, and they become whatever it is. So you could have a profile that has a certain number of apps, a restricted set of apps. You could have developers just with their preloaded development environments, or a scanning system there. But what does it look like at the host? One of the problems with Active Directory, or things that they try and use Active Directory and leverage it and try and change the schema, is doing that is quite difficult, because bigger enterprises don't like anyone messing with their Active Directory, and here's one of the reasons why. So we've got 2 mail servers in this particular system. One is the old version, Zarafa, and it was replaced by Capano. To actually remove those components or those fields in the Active Directory database is like, I just don't want to do it. It's just too risky. You don't want to screw around with the primary ways to authenticate with your company. So that's why it's very difficult to add different components into Active Directory, different fields and different tabs and things like that, because people don't want to do it. So we put the description in, because I think 99% of people don't put in Active Directory, don't put the description of what the system is, so we leverage that. And it just says carpet managed, but we've also in the past put last update date. So then we can use that to find out when, have an independent source of the information of when the last update happened. So in the attribute editor, which is a standard piece of Active Directory, there's a pre-existing field, which is the network address. And there's no definition in Active Directory as to what really that is meant to be, if it's a hardware address or an IP address. We use it as a hardware address. So that ties our database into Active Directory in a concrete way. So then when we change something in the database and we do the boot, our boot system goes, right, I'm looking for the MAC address, I've created a profile, now that's going to boot and become an Ubuntu machine or a SUSE system or an openSUSE system. We also, there's this audit tool which I was talking about earlier. It's at the moment, it's a very simple netboot image, just a memory resident, and it looks down the hardware and says, right, this is what you got, I'll get all the XML data, I'll generate an XML file, upload that to the system, and then I'll reboot, and using that boot next option, it's booted to that, and then once it restarts back into the old whatever operating system was running there. And so if you want to do an easy way to do the first part of doing a migration is running this, and even if it's just getting people to run it, for the very first time, you get everyone to run that by pressing whatever the network boot combination is at boot time. But that was also the kind of a bit naff, really. It's very hard to decode. So we're looking at doing something which is more of a lightweight browser thing that can also trigger push messages and put as much information on there as we might need. So that was just one of the things we were working on before we stopped working on the project. So with that, you can manage Linux workstations, you name it. If you can run it on Linux, you can run it using our systems, the carpet system as it's now known, VDI, VM, automotive, Internet of Things, anything where you might need Linux, so long as it's got enterprise-based hardware, enterprise-class hardware, you can use this system for it. So it kind of does make possible anything. Boot to browser, you could have very easily, there's another app that I found called Cage. We found a whole bunch of very valuable apps when we were doing this project, and Cage was one of them, and that's just a very, very simple Wayland-based kiosk environment where you can have one app running which could be a web browser, it could be any other kind of GUI, and you don't need all the heavy weight of KDE or GNOME. It just runs on top of Wayland. There are other things like doing you could do VDI based on KVM if that's something you want to do. So you can get that all running, and you can have high security YubiKeys. Fingerprint authentication is something we were working on. Something else is, can you do simultaneous dual boot? I mean, you can. This doesn't go very far, but you could have the system booted as one console and the local system, and you could actually have a virtual desktop running on the second on your control at F2. So you could actually be local and remote in different windows. And that's kind of all I've got. So it's really all about questions. And if anyone is interested in pursuing this, I've written all the code myself, and I kind of know a lot about doing this kind of stuff. So, any questions?
So I saw the immediate need for something that was reading out all the hardware info when you pointed to the desktops that were custom built.
Yeah.
But on the Dell side, once you've got that hardware synchronization, are you looking at integrating baseboard management control or something like that?
That's really is kind of that's more of a server level thing.
You can get it on your desktops. Yeah.
You can, but I'm not sure how. That's sort of a kind of price that most of the customers that I've worked with wouldn't be prepared to. But that was probably a few years ago. So yeah, we could do anything, so long as you can interrogate that hardware. You could do. You can run a DHCP on your baseboard controller and do all that as well. Yeah, so that's no problem. Now, in what context were you thinking of using it?
Well, just in the sense of both the discovery, like the hardware discovery, and then also identifying the systems. So like that's something you can get from the manufacturer. Usually you can get just a giant spreadsheet of all the base Macs and then identify which one is, SUSE's desktop, and then drop that in, or identify them as a group. Just say these systems will fit into this category, and then I'll deploy them all.
Yeah, we could do that. Another. Him in the corner again.
Okay, so next question. This very much is like very similar to what I would see in campaign style as adoption framework or migration acceleration program. Is it fitting into sort of an overarching kind of program for developing like an open source adoption framework or an open source acceleration program?
Well, right now, the code is kind of dormant, so it's whatever we want to do with it. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that I'm thinking through right now is how we can increase the adoption of SUSE, openSUSE product. And I think this could be a very strong part of it. My previous talk was all about how you get senior management to buy into it, and this is the tool we can use to do the deployment. When we're using a Perl-based version of this, I think that might have even been written by SUSE Consulting at Allied Irish Bank. We were rolling out changes across the entire network, 7,500 systems, on a weekly basis, and doing complete reloads whenever required. Even across, I mean, they had some very interesting things like you'd async the images to a directory of one machine, and then it would broadcast the image to all the other systems. And all those systems, all the hardware was identical. They bought them in bulk, one time, and they didn't want to replace it. So we looked at that, and I got a call from Santander, and they said, we've got 20,000 workstations. We've heard that you've done this with ARB. And so I went in and did some consulting, and ended up they chose not to go with Linux because they probably used it as a leverage to get a better price from Microsoft. But I think now with the current political situation, I think there's all sorts of things that and also web-based apps. It's a whole new world, which is what I said before. So yeah. Oh, has anyone else got any questions?
Years ago, I put together a project very similar using the what is now the Linux in Schools project to boot all of the systems into an antivirus and do large-scale antivirus scanning on entire systems.
Yeah.
Are there other aspects of your system that you think are built for short-term automation, automated projects, and activities like that?
Well, I guess at its heart, it's a targeted image delivery system. So you could be delivering bunker buster to use so you could be blowing away everything on that machine, or you could do a net boot and it runs in memory. It's whatever if the hardware is capable of running Linux, you can deploy a network image like Aeon, although I haven't confirmed with Richard that that's actually possible yet, but he said he's looking into it. But there's no reason why you can't do that, or you can just run a memory resident image. That's how we do the audit tool. We could just use it as an audit method. So just get everyone to but grabbing those initial MAC addresses and tying them in, this is also important, tying the MAC address into the machine node in Active Directory. Because after that reboot, if it's an Active Directory enabled workstation using triple SD, the user can just go in the following morning, log in with their Active Directory username and password, and they're in. There's nothing else to do. So you do all the work up front, whatever that work needs to be. If it's an Active Directory workstation you're trying to migrate to Linux, it's done because it's all integrated with Active Directory. No host name change, nothing. It's all the same object. It doesn't create new objects in Active Directory.
Sun Microsystems was the same way.
Yeah. Well, obviously we're better than. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much.